Should the government get tougher on Insulate Britain? 0207 862 2222 is the number you need to call. Tell us what you think, because they were at it again. Just yesterday, here they are, causing chaos in Dartford, this time in Kent, just near the M25. Campaigners stopped traffic again by gluing themselves to the road. Well, one fed-up driver there took a rather unconventional approach to sharing his disdain. He played the bagpipes at them. That will teach them a lesson.
I don't think that's a punishment.
Well, and they're clapping. I don't know why they're clapping. He, the bagpipe player, the angry driver, was taken away. The protesters are still there. Well, meanwhile, traffic was brought to a standstill on a busy A40 in West London this time. Again, another angry driver, I say many of them. This one started spraying the protesters with what appears to be ink. Hopefully it was ink and nothing too dangerous. Hopefully the ink wasn't dangerous as well. Well, there are currently 4 court injunctions against the environmental campaign group, banning them from obstructing traffic on more than 4,000 miles of motorways and A roads across England. But Insulate Britain say they don't care and are more concerned with their cause getting the government to insulate all UK homes by 2030. So do ministers need to do more to stop them for their own safety, if anything else? Or do you actually back their cause? Mike, how do you feel about Insulate Britain?
Well, look, this is a tiny group of protesters compared to the population of this country, and they're not career criminals, OK? These are people who think they've got a case and they go and make these extraordinary protests which inconvenience millions of people. I mean millions. Once you block up the M25, you've got 60 miles of motorways in all directions which are blocked up. Now, they're not career criminals, so we don't need to detain them in Category A prisons, but we should detain them somewhere once they've been taken off the road.
But they're happy to be jailed.
They say they're happy to be jailed, but they don't mean that. What I'm saying is, if you look at these statistics, when these people are detained and taken away and booked in a police station, they're then let go and they go back on protest the next day. There's not a great number of them. We must detain them somewhere. Go and find an old disused holiday camp or something like that and say, I'm sorry, you've got to stay here for 30 days now because you have been a public nuisance.
Oh, we're China now. Okay.
Yeah, no.
So what you want is like the Blair-era terror legislation used on retired GPs for blocking a road?
Well, they are disrupting the country in a massive way, and it's disproportionate to their cause, absolutely disproportionate. Look, the other thing is, by the way, I'm sorry, when their hands are glued to the road, I think they should be charged £1,000 for the stuff that's needed to get their hand off the road, because that in itself is another ridiculous protest which we shouldn't have to put up with.
Mike is speaking to the drivers, the many drivers who've been held up by Insulate Britain. The people who were trying to take loved ones to hospital and they couldn't get through. People are angry and they're getting tired of this.
And I really understand that. When it comes to the tactic itself, I think it's really important that we have a debate about whether or not you think that's the right strategy, right? It's for all of us to make up our own minds. But here's something which I really think is important to say. When climate change, it's happening now. We're seeing an increased frequency of extreme weather events. London gets turned into the Poseidon adventure every time there's a heavy rain. So just down my road, on West Green Road, I saw flooding during the summer. And you don't see drivers being, murderously furious about that kind of disruption. So I think that there is an unbalance here, something very unbalanced about the level of anger and the violence directed at these protesters, rather than the kind of disruption being caused by global heating, which is in fact much worse. And I think that history is going to look very unkindly at the way these protesters have been treated, in terms of people ramming cars at them, dragging them off. No, there was a video of a woman in there ramming a car. Wait, Mike, I listened to you very patiently. People ramming cars into them, spraying ink in their faces, dragging them out the road and tying them to railings. We're going to look at that the same way we look at images of dogs being set on freedom riders and civil rights era protesters.
I think one of the worries is
those protests were against the law as well.
Ash, one of the worries, though, is that they are putting themselves in danger, not just by gluing themselves on the roads, but actually the angry drivers now getting so fed up, they're coming out and taking action against them. You're seeing, gosh, that driver that sprayed ink in their face. We hope it's ink and hope it's nothing dangerous. We're seeing drivers come out dragging them themselves. These angry drivers, they could hurt themselves.
When it's come to every important cause in history, and I think that arguably there's no more important cause than climate change, you've seen people being willing to put their lives on the line for what they believe. We saw that with the Civil Rights era and the Freedom Riders. We saw that with the suffragettes, throwing themselves under the king's horse, putting themselves in real physical danger. And the question you've got to ask yourself is, why is it that these ordinary people, retired GPs, reverends, they're not career criminals, as you said, think this is so important and see that the government isn't doing enough on their behalf?
But I think
they're
the thing that's
in
frustrating,
danger.
Ash, and I totally understand what you're saying, sorry to interrupt. I think the thing that's frustrating is that when you've got people that are trying to get to a hospital, like someone that's, you know, had a heart attack in an ambulance, or someone that's ill, or someone who needs to get to their mum that's, you know, unwell with cancer in hospital, and they're not moving out the way. And I feel so frustrated for those people.
And I completely empathise with that. And that's why I'm saying, when it comes to the tactic itself, let's have a discussion. Are you targeting the right people? Why aren't you targeting those in power? Are you going to have this knock-on effect on ambulances? I think that's a really important discussion. But what I am absolutely against is the way in which violence targeting these protesters, I think, has been legitimised by media outlets, which has lionised and heroised people for doing things like ramming their cars into them. I think that's disgraceful.
You know, we've never looked at the figures about insulation in this country. So I had a look at them last night. You know, we were doing this. In 2008, 21% of houses in this country were insulated. By 2019, that's 38.6%. So what I'm saying is, in much the same way as, you know, we have to look after the climate and the planet and all that, we are looking after insulation in this country.
But 38% is still the minority of houses.
No, but what I'm saying is, these people are saying it's so apocalyptic, they want it done now, today. Now,
yes.
I think they've...
No, by 2030, Mike,
I think they've drawn enough attention to it now to go home, because I'm much more aware of insulation than I was before they started.
But is it happening?
But it is already happening.
But is it happening?
Already happening.
There was a report which came out today from the Systems Change Lab, which found that across every corner of society, we are failing to meet our targets if we want to keep global temperatures at 1.5.
Let's take a call on this, Mike. Ash, let's take a call on this, Rezi.
So we're going to speak to Steph in Edinburgh now, who says the protesters are actually turning people off the cause.
Steph, why do you say that?
Hi, I just feel like they're turning people off the cause because basically they're going to two extremes. And I know there's like other things like Extinction Rebellion have asked me to do things, and they want me to do things to get arrested and things like that, like glue myself. And I don't really want that, but I do agree that something needs to be done about the climate. I think all the people protesting need to, it's not them that needs to do anything. I think it's the people in power now that need to do stuff. And I feel like...
Steph, the fact that you're saying you do agree something needs to be done, would you say that the actions of Insulate Britain and the conversations that's now started off the back of that, has that helped you come to that decision? Are you understanding because of their protests, would you say?
No, I would say I already knew about it through like watching other videos, and I've always been aware of climate things, and I'm trying to be more eco-friendly. But I feel like the government now needs to, and all the people in power need to start listening to people like Greta Thunberg and start doing things.
What should they do though, Steph? What should they do?
Cut carbon emissions and have electric cars and charger points everywhere, and the quick chargers. They need to also offer...
makes up much of Boris Johnson's green strategy. But Steph from Edinburgh, thanks so much for calling us this morning. We'll make sure you stay with us, because after the break we will be joined by Insulate Britain campaigner Cameron Ford to find out what he thinks about all of this, and he's prepared to stick around to take your calls too. Hello again, Ash and Mike are still with us this morning. Later we'll be asking whether all MPs should be forced to wear face masks. But we've been talking about Insulate Britain and whether the government needs to get tougher on them. I'm joined now by Cameron Ford, who is from the group. Cameron, good to have you with us this morning. Cameron, I think the question many people are asking, it's been 15 days of protest from Insulate Britain. How long are you going to keep doing this for?
Yeah, I sincerely hope that we don't have to carry on doing this for any length of time. Sir Patrick Vallance, who is the Chief Government Scientific Advisor, he said that it's crucial that the measures we know will help are enacted as quickly as possible. And so it's quite clear when these measures are enacted, we'll stop our campaign of non-violent civil resistance.
Apparently, Patrick Vallance was talking about planes, not insulation, and you are protesting and calling on the government to change our policy in insulating homes. So why quote him?
Because it's part of a broader picture, isn't it? I mean,
Cameron,
this
I'm
is all...
sorry, you're campaigning to insulate Britain and you're pushing the government to do something now on that. That's not happening. If anything, you're having the government pushing back, trying to imprison you guys every time you protest. You're not getting very far. How long are you going to keep doing this for?
Well, I've just told you we're going to do this until we save the future of humanity, which Sir David King, the previous government scientific advisor, said we have 3 to 4 years right now to do that. Do you understand? That's by 2025, we have to radically change the direction we're in. So that's what this looks like, trying to bring about radical change.
Cameron, I would like to hear from your cause, rather than hearing from quotes, and misquoting, by the way, other people who are quoting on other aspects of the environment that need changing. In terms of insulating Britain, Boris Johnson is not doing anything. Nothing is changing there. So are you going to continue disrupting people's lives? I mean, on Monday, when you disrupted a road in London, you had a man trying to take his father for cancer treatment. He was so angry, so furious, that he said the kind of words that nobody should say to anybody, but such was the level of his fury, that he said he hoped that something like that would happen to the protesters that were there, that they had to deal with a loved one fighting cancer, and see how they felt if something like this happened to them. Cameron, how do you feel about that?
I feel terrible.
Then why keep doing this?
Because this is the only way. I mean, no one else is presenting a better way. The government is betraying us. We're about to see them go into COP and they're going to betray us. And so we need massive amounts of change right now. If anyone has a better idea, I'd be interested to hear from Ash if she has a better idea on what we can be doing. Genuinely, we need to all be coming together and trying to do, across all sides of the demographic, left and right, to get the government to radically change the path that they're taking us on, because it's taking us to a 2.7 degree world right now, and that is hell on earth.
Cameron, are you going to disrupt COP26 starting on Sunday, Glasgow?
We're carrying on with our campaign of non-violent civil resistance.
Will that include going to Glasgow?
I'm not here to talk about Glasgow. I'm here to talk about what a 2
Insulate Britain,
Celsius
and I'm asking you a
world
question
is.
in regards
Cameron,
to...
can I ask you a question, please? Do you know how many homes in this country are insulated, and what is the target for the number of homes in this country you want insulated within the next 4 crucial years?
Well, we've said it's all social housing and housing association houses by 2025.
Why is it impossible?
It's utterly impossible.
Why?
Because
Mike?
it would be one of the biggest engineering and building projects ever undertaken in
Yes,
this country.
why can't we do that?
can't
Right?
do it in 4
I'm sorry. This country is lagging behind other countries
No, we're
in
not.
terms of investment in insulation and in renewables. Let me just tell you something, right? China's the world's biggest polluter.
Yeah.
It also has more domestic solar capacity than the US and Europe combined. We are lagging behind.
Well,
now, I might have some issues with Insulate Britain's tactics. However, this is a just cause. If you insulate every social household by the end of the decade, you're saving poor households money.
I'm sorry, Ash, we insulate
creating jobs.
an awful lot of homes in this country.
No, 38%, that's the minority.
No. Department for Business, Energy and Industrial, 14.3 million properties, Cameron, have cavity wall insulation. 16.6 million have loft insulation. Now, that to me is a pretty good effort, and it's more than any other country in Europe. So, aren't you going to give some credit to the fact that we already have pretty good insulation policies in this country?
Credit doesn't mean
let Cameron respond. Sorry, Ash, let Cameron respond. Cameron, what do you say? What do you say about that? When it comes to insulating Britain, we're doing far better than some of our European counterparts.
Yeah.
I think we need to stop blowing our own trumpet. We're all doing pretty badly here. We are producing a large number of new homes every year, somewhere in the region of 240, 250,000 homes that are not. I think only 1 to 2% of those are A-rated energy rating. And so we need a 21st century homes. We can't be producing new homes that are getting built that are going to need retrofitting to prepare ourselves for this climate crisis.
We don't.
It's not good enough.
Cameron, let's take some calls from some of our viewers. Let's see how they feel about some of this. Rezi.
So we're going to go to David in West Yorkshire first, who says the government isn't being tough enough.
OK, David, you're agreeing with Cameron and the Insulate Britain calls. Why do you think the government isn't being tough enough? Oh, excuse me, you're being tough enough on the protesters. Excuse me, I thought you meant climate change. So you think the government should be hard on Insulate Britain. What do you think the government should do?
I think they should lock them all up.
They're doing that already, and they arrested nearly 50 people yesterday.
No, let me say, from personal experience, houses are getting insulated. I'm in the process at the moment of having mine just completely finished. It's had the walls have been insulated, the loft has been re-insulated, they've boarded it all up, they've redone all my complete attic for me, and they've even decorated the stairs. So to say that these haven't been jobs aren't getting done, they are getting done. I'm disabled. I've got mine through my disabilities. But the thing is, if things are getting done, to say it's not getting done is a complete fallacy.
Cameron, you've just heard from David. He is actually doing the things he needs to do that your group are calling for.
Yeah, I don't think people are aware of the enormity of the situation that's coming, and therefore the response that we need is not insulating a few houses. You know, the government's Green Homes grant would equate to 1 in 560 homes getting retrofitted to the standard they need. So at that rate, it would take 560 years to insulate the housing stock here and retrofit it
You're
properly.
hearing from somebody who's starting. This is where we start. We start with individuals. We start with people.
When we were in the Second World War, we didn't build just a few Lancaster bombers and hope that was going to be enough, did we? We came together, we had jewelers getting out there, learning how to make these planes. It was an absolutely nationwide effort. People need to understand the scale of what we need to be doing right now to avert an absolute disaster.
David, are you happy with that response? We need more people doing it.
Where does he think all the workforce is going to come from? To do it all at once?
Cameron, that's a very fair question, Cameron. How does the government go about insulating all homes in the time frame you've given us at 2030? What should the government be doing here, Cameron?
Well, for starters, I think people who are working in the City of London and other financial institutes and busy getting their money from fossil fuels, they should maybe start insulating some homes and do some meaningful work.
Again, though, I was really asking what should the government do? But let's take another call, though, Cameron. Rezi.
So we're going to speak to Aaron from London now, who actually supports the Insulate Britain protesters.
Aaron, why is it you support Cameron and his colleagues?
Well, I think that what he's doing is something I wouldn't be prepared to do, and I think that's full power to people like that, and full power to their elbow. The fact that they're willing to do it. I love the fact that they're stopping cars and whatnot. But obviously, as a car owner myself, I use the car literally so as minimal as possible, simply by using public transport. I walk. I'm making sure my schools are near where I live. My job is near where I live, so I don't have to use that car. And I just don't think enough people do that in society, so much of the fact that I don't know where it's gone, but there was this thing in the past where if you had more than one person, if you had only one person in a car, you would be charged a further penalty, because obviously it wasn't worthwhile.
Aaron,
and yet something like that isn't happening, and it should be happening.
Aaron, do you support these protesters gluing 100%. Their hands, in some cases faces, to the ground, disrupting major roads, disrupting hundreds of thousands of people?
Yeah, absolutely. Why, really, if you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs, so what do you expect them to do? What I think is the upshot of it all is that Boris should have regular dialogue with them. They have regular meetings, weekly, monthly, whatever, to show, if he wants to prove his credentials, why doesn't he show what he's doing on a regular basis and everybody sees it up front, so that these protesters can see what's going on, and therefore they can be won round eventually, that we're on the right path. I mean, look at this way. My parents are in their 80s. They don't have insulation. They don't even have a porch. I would go to the extent of insulating a house by sticking a porch in front wherever possible. I know how much that protects the heat in the house, and I think that should be an extension of the whole process.
Mike, do you think Aaron has a point? The government should start communicating with them, letting them know what... You've just mentioned some facts here, which Cameron doesn't look like he's very much aware of.
Yes, OK. I mean, what I would say is that I think negotiation is far better than what's going on at the moment. But you can't start negotiating with people who are openly breaking the law. They are impeding
Would
the
you have
Queen's
said that about
highway.
Martin Luther King?
Excuse me, I'm talking
Nelson
about
Mandela?
I'm talking about insulating. What I'm saying is...
We're talking about social movements which cause change. Martin
all
Luther
right.
King broke
Well, I'll
the
tell
law.
you
Nelson
another-
Mandela broke
all right,
the law.
Ash.
They were negotiated with, and they
All right, Ash,
won.
I'll tell you another one that changed the course of history when they stopped being aggressive, and that was the IRA. And when they decided to give up the arms and start negotiating with the government, that's how we
They
got
gave up
the
their
Good
arms
Friday Agreement.
after the Good
We
Friday.
got the Good Friday Agreement going because we started negotiating and stopped shooting each other. And what I'm saying is you can't suddenly say to people sitting on the M25, I tell you what, we'll give in to your demands now. You come to Whitehall and we'll do it your way. You just can't do it that way. You can't do it that way.
Illiterate.
Ash, you mentioned there were some things that you wouldn't be doing, that you're not necessarily supporting from Insulate Britain.
Well,
What
look,
might that be?
for me, this is coming from a position of strategy. What I want is the fastest road to decarbonisation possible. And I want that because by 2070, according to some models, 1/5 of the world will be too hot to live in. We're already seeing extreme weather events here, and you're going to see untold suffering. Now, for me, it's a case of how do you do that? Do you do that with a combination of, civil disobedience and a mass movement? Do you focus on the mass movement? This is an open conversation and I'm willing to have my mind changed about it. But the thing that I will say is that we tend to look back at history and go, oh, well, I would have been one of the good ones. I would have supported Martin Luther King. I would have supported the civil rights era. Actually, most Americans at the time didn't. Most Americans, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, had a negative view of him. They thought, oh, these civil rights protesters, they're all breaking the law. I won't support them. But
Aaron,
they won.
Aaron, thanks so much for calling us. Resi, any more calls?
Yes, we're going to go to Irene in Somerset now, who disagrees with Insulate Britain's protest methods.
Irene, what is it you disagree with mostly?
I'd like to know what the young man does as a job.
Yeah,
If these people can sit around doing nothing all day on the roads, who's paying them?
He's a carpenter.
Oh, is he? Well, when does he carpent?
When does he carpent?
Yeah, when does he carpent since you can sit on the road all day? My husband's a carpenter and he can't carpent sitting on roads all day.
He should
He's
be out
in
there
his
with Cameron.
workshop. What they need to do is be made to get out and have a job. That's what they need to be doing. These people are exactly the same as the idiots who went round with CND. They told us the world was going to end. They had kids terrified in school that we were going to have nuclear war and the children had to get under their desks. We had women at Greenham Common who
carbon
broke
emissions
down the
position.
houses at Greenham Common to mean nothing because they were demonstrating there. Beautiful big houses were worth tuppence because of these idiots who didn't have a job and were tying booties all around.
Cameron,
nonsense.
Thank you, Irene. Let's connect to Cameron, shall we? Cameron, do you feel like you're losing the support of people with what you're doing?
No, I would say our support is growing. It's expanding like concrete, perhaps. So I'm not worried about losing support.
Are you sure about that? What about the drivers, the many drivers, the many lives that you've disrupted in all of this?
Sure, it's unfortunate that we have to be in this situation, and if we're not gaining support, then it's only because the media have been lying to the general public for the last 30,
I'm sorry,
40
Cameron,
years.
what lies have the media been telling people?
About the climate crisis. They've not been reporting on it properly. If they had been, then more people would be up in arms and willing to risk arrest because they realise the truth of how little time we have left.
When it comes to every natural disaster, if there's every natural disaster that we would cover,
I'm not going to stand by. I'm not going to stand by and let the government decide who dies and who lives.
Cameron, don't raise your voice. Cameron, don't raise your voice. Sure, no one's disputing that, but don't raise your voice, Cameron. We're having a decent conversation here. Don't raise your voice at me. What I was trying to say is that as the media, anytime there is a natural disaster, if there seems to be any links to climate change, this is something we will report. When there are reports that are released showing the work that's not being done in terms of climate change, we also report on that, Cameron.
May I just make a suggestion?
Climate deniers for ages.
Very, very quickly, right? It's only in recent years that the BBC has stopped platforming climate deniers, and that is a change which came too late. And I say this all the time, which is, what if the media covered climate change the same way it did Brexit? During those years between 2016 and 2019, I couldn't do a single media appearance without being asked about Brexit. Every single politician, every single pundit had these questions put to them, and if we fudged, if we evaded, if we didn't know our facts, if we didn't give a good answer, you would have Emily Maitlis or Kirsty Walk or Nick Robinson or whoever it was really hauling you over coals about it. And I think that that's why it became such, a salient issue, right? It was at the top of the news agenda every single day for those years. And while we have seen better, more frequent coverage of the climate crisis, we certainly don't see it with that level of urgency or that level of for want of a better word, aggression from people who work in the media. Now, I count myself in this, right? I work in the media. I certainly haven't been covering it as much as I should. Now, going forward, as an organisation at Novara, we're going, why don't we cover this like we do the pandemic? Why don't we cover this the way we do Brexit? Let's make every politician's life absolute hell until we get results and good answers from them.
OK, all right. Irene, thanks for calling. Rezi.
So we're going to speak to Sally in Devon now, who's not a fan of the protests.
Sally, what is it you most dislike about the protests?
Well, I think they're wasting their time. They'd be better off actually raising money to insulate houses and getting off their backsides and insulate lofts and things. I think people who insulate lofts, it's not a terribly nice job. It can be very itchy. I was fortunate enough to get free insulation from the government for my walls and my roof, as all the rest of my family was. It wasn't means tested, so I had it done quite a while ago. We have the little Swedish girl going on about people saying blah, blah, blah. Well, these people are doing blah, blah, blah. Perhaps they should, they have some very well-educated, as I understand it, retired people who could probably launch a campaign to get money to insulate things, and big companies would probably be falling over themselves to support it. And then the young man who you're talking to could actually give up his weekends and go and put some insulation in houses
Cameron,
instead
why
of doing
don't you...
himself to the road.
It's a very, very fair point from Sally. Instead of disrupting roads, disrupting people's lives, why not go into people's homes and stick up the insulation in their homes instead?
Yes, I am retrofitting a 1930s house, bringing it into a 21st century life that was needed. I both run a business and am an activist. I'm doing both. I'm trying to hold two different things in, trying to have integrity with my work and the way that I work with timber and not concrete, as we've seen. And I'm also trying to bring about the radical change that's needed that will only come about from non-violent civil resistance. And I ask people, if COP fails us, we need to come together and say, not on my watch.
Well, Cameron, you're not going to get much insulation done if you're jailed, and this is exactly what can happen. Every time you protest from now on, you could face a time in jail. But Mike, are you convinced by some of the things that Cameron's been saying?
Well, look, Cameron's got a point of view and I respect it. But Cameron, can I ask you one thing, an observation about your group? When we see these people protesting on the roads, they are generally speaking middle-aged or old. And I don't see people of your generation amongst those protesters. Normally speaking, as in Greta Thunberg, these protests, particularly about world climate and change, are led by young people worried about their future. But it very much, to me, the profile of your protesters are actually middle-aged or old people who don't have as big a future in front of them as the young. Why aren't the young getting involved in your movement and supporting it as much as the middle-aged people?
Well, I guess a lot of young people don't want to go to prison for 2 years. There's not many people like myself who are willing to do that because they've seen the severity of the situation and risk that eventuality.
Cameron Ford from Insulate Britain, really good talking to you on Jeremy Vine this morning. Thank you. Well, next we're going to have our stories of the day is hotel quarantine.